Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from the last group. Today we are going to discuss about the classification of language family. But first of all, let me to introduce myself. My name is Salsabila Reziana as the moderator for today, and my partner are Rifka Rantiani Cahyadi, Sandi Muhammad Ramdani, Raihan Khusnul Amal, Resa Pratiwi Putri, Rezqi Hidayat, Salva Shauma and Dede Siti Nurpaujiah. The topic for today are: the first is the language family, the second is the comparative method, the third is assembling cognates and establishing sound correspondence, the fourth is reconstructing the proto-sounds, the fifth is early historical linguists, the sixth is internal reconstruction, and the last is conclusion.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Rifka Rantiani Cahyadi, and I would like to explain the first material is the introduction of the language family. A language family is a group of languages related through descent from a common ancestral language or parental language, called the proto-language of the family. Whenever two or more languages develop in this way from a single language, we say that they are genetically related or sister language, and any group of such related languages constitute a language family, descendant from a common parent or proto-language. Sister language are said to descend genetically from a common ancestor. The divergence of a proto-language into daughter language typically occurs through geographical separation, with the original speech community gradually evolving into distinct linguistic units. Individuals belonging to other speech communities may also adopt language from a different language family through the language shift process. For instance, students of French, Spanish, and Italian often recognize similarities between these languages. Words in the three languages for the same referent often sound similar, and the three languages share many similar rules for inflecting verbs and constructing sentences. French, Spanish, and Italian all developed from regional dialects of the Latin, spoken by soldiers and administrators of the Roman Empire. Students of modern German and English often notice similar words in the two languages, which developed from dialects of an earlier Proto-Germanic language.
The comparative method in historical linguistics is concerned with the reconstruction of an earlier language or earlier state of a language on the basis of the comparison of related words and expression in different languages or dialect derived from it. Because the process of language change are systematic, historical linguists can read back through the evidence of those changes to reconstruct earlier version of language. Much of this evidence lies in the existence of cognates, that is, phonetically similar words with the same referent, in two or more languages. The comparative method infers a common parent or prototype language from a comparison of cognate form found in sister languages, and from analysis of the changes that have occurred in various sister languages. The principal steps involved in comparative method are assembling cognates, establishing set of correspondence, and reconstruction the form of the proto-language. The sounds of proto-language are reconstructed first, then with a reconstructed phonology, the vocabulary and grammar of the proto-language can be reconstructed at least partially as well.
Raihan Khusnul Amal, and in here I want to explain about assembling cognates and stabilizing set of correspondence. But before we go to the materials, here are the definition of cognate set, and sound correspondence. Cognate is a word or morpheme which is related to a word in sister lang by reason of this form having been inherited by the sister lang from a common word of the proto-lang from which the sister language isn't. And then cognate set, the set of words which are related to one another across the sister language because they are inherited and descend from a single word of the proto-lang. And then sound correspondent is a set of cognate sounds, the sounds found in the related words of cognate set which correspond from one related language to the next because they descend from a common ancestral sound. Is assumed to recur in various cognate sets. And then the first one is assembling cognate. We begin by looking for potential cognates among related lang or among language for which there is reason to suspect relatedness and list them in some orderly arrangement in row or column. Then it is convenient to begin with cognates from basic vocabulary, body part, close kinship term, log number, common geographical term, scientists resist borrowing more than other sorts of vocabulary, and for the comparative method, we want to compare only through cognates. For successful construction, we must eliminate all other set of similar words which are not due to inheritance from a common ancestor, such as those which exhibit similarities among the language because of borrowing chance, coincidence, etc. Ultimately, it is the systematic correspondence that we discover in comparative method that demonstrate through cognate. For example, English word is taboo is like the sixth Polynesian form because of borrowing from Tongan into English, not because of a genetic similarity. That problem can usually be overcome by using basic vocabulary such as kinship terms, numbers, body parts, and pronouns. Next is establishing sound correspondence. Recurs frequently among the Romance slang. We assume that the sound correspond is genuine. It is highly unlikely that a set of systematically corresponding sounds, such as this one, could come about by sheer accident in a large number of words, so similar in sound and meaning across this length. The next step involves determining the regular sound correspondence exhibited by the list of potential cognates. For example, between English day and Latin dies, they have same meaning, has no probative value. Then English initial D does not regularly match Latin D, since a large set of English and Latin non-borrowed cognates cannot be assembled such that English D repeatedly and consistently correspond to Latin D at the beginning of a word, and whatever sporadic match can be observed are due either to chance as in the example Latin diabolus and English devil, but ultimately of Greek origin. If there are many regular correspondence sets of this kind, the more are better. A common origin becomes a virtual certainty, particularly if some of the correspondents are known, trivial, or unusual. Well, that's all I can say. That's all of my explanation, and I will give another material explanation to my friend.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Resa Putri, and I would like to discuss about reconstructing proto-sound. How we reconstruct proto-sound? We reconstruct the proto-sound by postulating what the sound in the proto-language most likely was on the basis of the phonetic properties shared by the descendant sounds in the various languages in the correspondence set. Here's the example. Table sets of cognates from Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, and Germanic and their sound correspondences. 1a. Pater, Peter, father. Distribution is word initial. 1b. Anepsios, nepos, napa, nefa. In 1c, spatio, spa, speho, spy. And then 1d, huper, super, upari, ubar, over. The differences among the languages in cognate sets 1a until d, word initial and medical F and interovocalic P in Germanic, where the other languages have P, are systematic and predictable if we posit that these sounds have their source in a single Proto-Indo-European phoneme P, which underwent sound changes in German but not in Greek, Latin, and Sanskrit. Proto-sounds are marked by an asterisk, which means reconstructed, not directly documented, as in phonological analysis within a single language. This hypothesis follows the criterion of plurality, since the majority of the languages, Greek, Latin, and Sanskrit, have the sound P. Under this analysis, Proto-Indo-European P remained unchanged in German after an unvoiced S. Change to a voiced B between voiced sounds and change to F elsewhere. This is a simpler theory than, for example, trying to explain how all these different languages somehow derived the phoneme P from Germanic P, B, and F. It is also more phonetically plausible. Next, 2a until 2d. 2a. Trace, Thresia, 3. Distribution is word initial. 2b. Prata, classmate or brother. 2c. East, after S. 2d. Pater, Peter, father, between voiced sounds. So the sounds th, d, and th in cognate sets 2a until d have the same predictable distribution as p in cognate sets 1a until d. By the same reasoning as for p, we reconstruct a Proto-Indo-European T for these sets. In invert that in Germanic it remained unchanged after an S, changed to D between voiced sounds not preceded by the accent assisted in Greek and Sanskrit, and changed to C elsewhere.
Okay, I will continue the explanation from Resa. So we can see in the table for cognate set 3 until D, in which the sounds are also in complementary distribution and follow the same pattern as B and T. We construct a Proto-Indo-European K and infer a similar sound change in Germanic, in which the Proto-K remained unchanged after an S, change to G between voiced sound, and change to H elsewhere. Our hypothesis of sounds change in German gains support from its generalizability. It provides a common account of the natural class of voiceless stops. Using this kind of reasoning for cognate sets 4, 5, and 6, we reconstruct Proto-Indo-European B, D, and G respectively and assume that these sounds become voiceless P, J, K in Germanic, and that the Proto-G become palatal G in Sanskrit. This analysis leads to the construction of the following phonemes in the Proto-Indo-European P, T, K, B, D, G. With enough cognate sets, it will be possible to reconstruct the remaining sounds of the proto-language, and from this foundation to reconstruct its grammatically and lexical morphemes, inflectional and derivational system, and the rest of its grammatical structure.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Salva and I would like to explain about early historical linguists. In 1786, Sir William Jones delivered a paper describing similarities between Sanskrit, Latin, and Greek. He argued that these similarities were too systematic to be attributable to change and concluded in that they had developed from a common source. Jones's work sparked many advances in historical linguistics over the next several decades. In 1814, Rasmus Rask formalized the techniques of the comparative method, assembling cognates and deducing rules to account for systematic sounds changes to reconstruct proto-languages. Other linguists extended the Indo-European family tree to include Persian and the Germanic languages. In 1822, Jacob Grimm, a linguist as well as a collector of German folk tales, described the systematic shift from the PIE consonant to the Germanic consonant, which subsequently became known as Grimm's law. For example, according to Grimm's law, PIE voiceless stops became Germanic voiceless fricatives, and PIE voice stops became Germanic voiceless stops, and PIE voiced stops became Germanic voiceless stops. Accounting for the sets of sound correspondences in table earlier, Grimm's law explained a number of other Germanic consonant shifts as well, making the case of the generic correlation of the Germanic languages to the Romance languages. There were exceptions to Grimm's law, but they were systematically related to specific phonetic environments, allowing historical linguists accounting for these exceptions to discover even more about Proto-Indo-European and subsequent changes in its daughter languages. As we can see from our reconstruction of PIE voiced and voiceless stops, the comparative method is highly successful in showing what the proto-sounds were like. Some aspects of the prehistory of the phonologies of each of the cognate languages in ways in which they differ from each other. However, reconstructed sounds are less precise phonetically than the cognate sounds on which they are based. Not surprisingly, the comparative method leads to a reconstructive model of the proto-language which is regular and various and free, whereas in reality, languages have substantial irregularity and variation. Thank you.
My name is Salsabila Reziana, and I would like to explain about the internal reconstruction. Unlike the comparative reconstruction, which relies on the comparison of forms across related languages, the internal reconstruction relies on analysis of forms within a single language. Some morphophonomic changes in the history of a language leave noticeable traces in its current forms, so that by analyzing these traces, we can reconstruct a layer forms of some morphemes and the changes which led to their current forms. The comparative and internal evidence are often compared for corroboration or refinement of a posited reconstruction of a proto-language. Earlier we saw that sound change tends to cause morphological change by creating the allomorphs. For example, the Old High German had pairs of alternating allomorphs: lamb, kalb, kelp, and blood as follows. In the nominative singular, there are lamb, kalb, and blood. In the nominative plural, there are lambir, kelbir, and bladder. We can infer that the E alternation in these allomorphs springs from a single phoneme A, which became E before R. This is phonetically plausible because the fronting of a big vowel before a suffix containing a front vowel in a common phonetic change, or we can say that is assimilation. Using just the facts of Old High German, we can deduce that earlier forms of the language had only one nominative morpheme for each of these words, like lamb, kelp, and blood, until a sound change or assimilation led to the development of new allomorphs.
My name is Dede Nurpaujiah, and now I would like to make the conclusions of this presentation. And the conclusion is, language family is a distinct body of language that is derived from a particular common language. A language that can reproduce those languages is called proto-language. In general, this is because of geographical and the language shift. Proto-language of a different group of languages can be found using the Counteractive Method. The main steps that can be used in the method include the following. First, assembling cognates. It means the collection of almost the same words or morphemes from different language. The second is establishing sound correspondences. It means comparing the sounds or phonemes from data that has been collected. And the last is reconstructing the proto-sounds. It means determining the proto-sounds from data that has been analyzed.
Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.